Tonight we're going to talk about the part of this phrase where the people had a mind to work. And what does it mean to work and to accomplish the goal that the people surrounding Nehemiah had to accomplish? What they had to do. Now, for most of you who have been here throughout the week, but as a quick reminder, Nehemiah was faced with some terrible news. He had heard about the walls around Jerusalem being in shambles. They were rubble. They were destroyed, and that left the city of Jerusalem vulnerable to the enemies of God. And when he heard that, he wept and he mourned and he prayed and he fasted and he begged God for forgiveness of himself and his people. And God gave him the courage to go speak to the king of Persia, who gave him access to timber, who gave him authority to go and rebuild those walls. And Nehemiah went and he traveled and he got to the place and he looked and inspected the walls to see the condition in which they were in. And what did he see? He saw gates destroyed. He saw walls and crumbled. He saw challenges immediately in front of him. And then the naysayers came out and they said, "Oh, you can't do this. It's impossible." Then what did we read and what did we learn last night? Nehemiah went to the people and he implored them and he asked them, he said, "Come and do this. Show God's power and that God's involved in this." And the people said that we will rebuild. Let us go and rebuild. Now, the attitude of these people is something we shouldn't overlook. These people had a mind to work. They had a mind ready to be used for the glory and the purpose of God. And what did that attitude, what did that mind do? It allowed something which was seen as impossible to be accomplished in short order. In Nehemiah 6, verses 15 and 16, so the wall was finished on the 25th day of the month of Elul in 52 days. And when all the enemies heard of it, all the nations around us were afraid and fell greatly in their own esteem, for they perceived that this work had been accomplished with the help of our God. In 52 days, they did the impossible because they had a mind to work. They weren't concerned about their ego. They weren't concerned about their status. They got their hands dirty and they got involved. They leaned in and they were a part of something bigger than themselves. They had a mind to work. Now, I remember not too many years ago, my family got in a car and took a short journey up from Harlingen, Texas to Tulsa, Oklahoma, where a congregation of 50 or 60 people at the time conducted a great feat. They hosted the area-wide meeting. Now, I can tell you how impressive it is. I knew how much work, I thought I knew how much work was involved until last year when we hosted. I'm telling you, that's a lot of work. But this congregation pulled it off. They pulled it off. They had a task in front of them and they came together for a common purpose and they did something that others might seem impossible. Something that was hard, something that was challenging. People got involved and helped accomplish a great task. When I was asked to come and speak about building a team, my first thought was, any team that can do what you all did a couple of years ago must be a great team. And I'll tell you what, I am not discouraged at all with the group of people that I see in front of me. I see people with talent. I see people with ability. I see people with a heart and a passion for the Word of God and a passion for teaching the lost. And a group of people that know how to accomplish great things. There's a lot of people in this world that have not accomplished what y'all were able to accomplish as a congregation. And we can't look past that and think, oh, that's the past. We can see the results of hard labor, the results of the effort that was poured in. Just as the people in the time of Nehemiah saw a completed wall in 52 days, they could look back and see the success that comes from hard work and dedication to the cause of God. And you can as well. So what do we see in these things? We see, and as I mentioned last night, for those that don't know, I said one thing. And I said one thing, not because it was more work for me, but I wanted you to have to think, what is that one thing in your mind? And what do we see? We see a variety of things, but there's a common theme. The common theme is that of activity. not complacency, not a healthy congregation is one that just lives peacefully, that just gets along. I can tell you, if I ask a lot of people that, you say, what is a good congregation? Well, it's one that never fights. It's one that always gets along. It's one that's always happy. But sometimes no conflict means there's no relationship. And we're going to talk about that in depth later this week, so I'm not going to step on that too much. But what do we see here? We see what we see as a completed wall of a healthy congregation. Now, if I were to ask you, where do you think that wall is built at this stage? You may say we're only halfway there. You may say we're 3/4 of the way there, or we're 98% there. You may have different ideas and concepts of the level of completion, but here's the thing. Whether you think you're 98%, guess what? The work needs to continue. You have to have a mindset that you're not almost there. Because the moment you are there, they say this in any kind of organization, you're either growing or you're dying. There is no maintaining. You're either growing by having more children or evangelizing or bringing people from other places, or you're dying. Because age does not discriminate. Time does not stop. So even if you think the congregation is nearly there, and maybe that night after the area-wide meeting, everyone stood around and said, we did it. I know that we did. After there, we did it. And it was real easy for us to say, mission accomplished, time to hibernate for the next 2 years. But that's not how we should approach these things. We should continue to work. We should be motivated by the success that God has done in us, but then we've got to push forward. You see, you've got to put in the work. Galatians chapter 6 verse 7 says, do not be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatever a man sows, that he will also reap. What does it mean, God is not mocked? You know, there are some people that think you can take shortcuts in life. You know, there are people that say, I can go buy a lottery ticket and I'm going to make my millions. And yes, it happens. Never the mind that 90+% of those people end up bankrupt when it's all said and done. It doesn't fulfill their dreams and wishes and hopes. But how often have we thought of shortcuts? We take shortcuts in our diet and exercise. We take our shortcuts in our study techniques and we turn to AI to help us. I mean, I use AI a lot now because it's a lot easier to tell AI to summarize 20 different responses than for me to have to put them in categories. But how often do we take shortcuts in life? How often do we try to get to the end without going through the process? And if you are truthful about that, how often has that failed for you? I know every time I tried to take a shortcut, every time I try to do it the quick and easy way, something always happens. And maybe there's short-term success, but in the long term, there isn't stability. There's not a long-term growth and long-term stable situation. We've got to put in the work. God is not mocked. God sees right through that, and He sees our heart. He sees our intentions. And we can go through the motions and say, oh, we're serving God, we're showing up 3 times a week. But if our heart is far from Him, He sees that, He knows that. So He expects us to put in the work. He says, what you sow is what you reap. But sometimes we look at things and we go, oh, well, I can get whatever I want. I can reap whatever I want. Well, what are you sowing into that? God is not mocked. He's not going to allow you to have success without the work. And this congregation is the same. We've got to put in the time. We may look at what we think is the perfect congregation. We may say, man, I wish I was like this other congregation. Look how successful they are. Look at the multi-generations of people and families. And look at all the ministry activities they're doing. And all the fellowship. And oh, they have so much love. And all these things. Guess what? That didn't just happen. That took work. I sit down from time to time, and I know Rusty has and others have, and sit down with elders that have been serving as elders for many years, and you see these congregations and you go, man, this is easy. Look at how wonderful this. They're like, you have no idea how much work it's been to maintain this congregation. You don't know how much sweat, how many tears have been shed, how much effort has been put in to maintain unity in this congregation. It may seem like things are great from afar, but there's a lot of struggles. It's not easy. This congregation may have the idea that other congregations are doing things better. And there may be things that other congregations we can learn from. I'm going to go home and I'm going to take things that I've learned from here and bring it back home. And as I travel, I see things. I go, hey, this is something that's going well. Let me see how we can incorporate it. But at the end of the day, there's no shortcuts. There's no easy path. And there's no magic answer. There's no magic pill that we can take. It all comes down to how committed are we to work? How much in are we? Are we going to put in the time? They had a mind to work. And notice as this congregation put in the time, or this group of people put in the time to work, that they got it to a stage. And we'll talk about what happens after that first half. Because they started having conflicts. They started having problems. They got halfway done, and guess what? People came from, and they started to threaten them with violence and other things. But they got to that point because they had a mind to work. They were committed to the work. But you know, sometimes we look at work as a problem. You know, work is a gift, not a curse. You know, sometimes people think of work and they go back to the garden and they go, well, you know, if Adam and Eve hadn't eaten the apple, we'd be just having... Did you know that work has always been a part of God's plan? In fact, if you look at Genesis chapter 2, verse 15, it says, then the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to tend and keep it. God gave man a job. It's always been a blessing. Why? Because an idle mind causes problems. You know, if we aren't actively working with our mind and our hands, our nature is to seek mischief. Our nature is to seek things to fulfill the pleasures and to fulfill the lusts of the flesh. So God has given us an avenue to occupy our mind. Gives us problems to solve. Gives us things to do with our hands and with our feet and with our bodies. Work is not a curse. Now, the curse came in the result of some of the effects that they had to endure. The sweat and the thorns and the problems that came with the work, but the work itself was not the curse. Work is a gift. God has given us work as a gift, and we need to change our perspective when we think about work. We need to change our perspective that it is a gift of God. It is not a curse. And we may not like our jobs. We may not like our secular job. I get it. I've had jobs I did not like. I had jobs that were hard. I had jobs that I did not enjoy, but I needed to do those things to provide for my family, to gain new skill sets and knowledge and so forth. And it's easy for me to look at those things as a curse, but the reality is that all those things were helping me to grow. Work is a gift, not a curse. Proverbs 12 and 11 says, whoever works his land will have plenty of bread, but he who follows worthless pursuits lacks sense. You know, sometimes we look at these pursuits and we go off in all these different side quests. You know, we go through life and like, whoo, shiny object. Let me go over here. Let me go do this. Let me go get distracted with this hobby. Let me go get distracted with this new thing. But what does he say? We shouldn't have a mind that's always looking for something else. We need to have a mind that is focused with the intent to do the work that's before us. And not get so distracted with so many things that can pull us away. But when we work our land, he says, you'll have plenty of bread. But there are plenty of pursuits that are flat out worthless. That we occupy our mind with. Occupy our hands on our phones with. How many hours have we wasted on things that produce no fruit? Well, we need to put our effort and our focus on things that matter. And we know that if I were to clock in on a 9-to-5 job, my boss would expect what? He'd expect me to be at my desk doing my job. Or out in the oil field doing my job. But he'd expect work to be done in those hours, right? He would not expect me to just go through and just kind of halfway do something and just, search cooking receipts or cooking recipes all day. He'd want me to do what it is that I was hired to do. When it comes to the Lord's church, we need to understand that our work shouldn't be aimless. It should not be without direction, but it should be focused to produce fruit. Our time with one another needs to be focused and needs to be intentional with what we're trying to accomplish. Fellowship is great. I love fellowship, but fellowship, just hanging out without any purpose, doesn't produce fruit. There needs to be a purpose behind it. Now, that purpose might be to encourage people that are on the fringe, to bring them back in closer into the core. Well, that's a purpose. But sometimes we just do things because we do them. And we need to be thoughtful that we're not wasting our time doing things, following worthless pursuits, but we are seeking to do the work of God in a productive and an effective and a purposeful way. You see, God works. When we look at the Creator, we see how hard God demonstrates for us work. In John chapter 5, verse 17, but Jesus answered them, my Father has been working until now, and I have been working. Work is not just something we do, it's a reflection of who God is. Think about that. God could have instantaneously created all things, but what did He do? He demonstrated for us 6 days of work. 6 days He labored in creating the earth and all that's in it. And on the seventh day, He rested. Why? God could have done it a different way. He could have done this and be done with it. But God never did things without purpose. Everything was intentional. Everything was a design. Everything was for a benefit. Just like we talked earlier in the week about the feeding of the 5,000s, how that Jesus asked His disciples to go look for bread and fishes, like He needed them to do that. No, He gave them a job to do. He included them. He helped them have investment in that situation so that the child could bring the fish and could provide his talents to the equation. God works. We can work. It's a testimony of the power of God that He labored, and He shows us in that. And so when we approach our work, do we approach our work in the same way that God did? Do we put our care and our passion and our creativity and diligence into that effort? In our secular jobs, do we do that? Do we recognize that in the world we're spending, if we have 24 hours in a day, there's some debate on that subject, but say we have 24 hours in a day, and 8 of those we sleep, and 8 of those we have leisure, and 8 of those we have secular employment. Are we putting our creativity in all those buckets? Are we putting our care in those buckets? Are we putting our care and our effort in that physical labor or that secular labor? And what about those 8 hours that we're not sleeping or not at work? How are we utilizing those for the other things that matter? But you know, those 8 hours of the 24 are evangelistic opportunities that are right there in front of us every day. Prospects every day that we can talk to. And our work reflects God's power. Jesus illustrated in Mark 10:45, for even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give His life a ransom for many. You know, Jesus could have come with the attitude to be served, but He didn't. And we need to be really, really careful, men, how we treat our wives in this subject. Do we come home and we demand service? Do we demand them to serve us? Or do we come home with an attitude to serve them? It's real easy for us to be, I was about to speak a little Spanish, macho, and say, hey, it's my home. Take care of me. But that's not what God did. That's not what Jesus modeled. He washed the feet of his disciples. He did something that wasn't for a noble person or a kingly person to do, yet He did it. We need to be mindful of that when we have church fellowship opportunities or times that we spend together. Are we there to be served, or are we there to serve? Because I can tell you, if everyone shows up to the potluck wanting to be served, then no one gets to eat because there's no food. But if we come with an attitude that we're bringing of our talents, we're bringing of our means, we're bringing of the things we have to share, then everyone's filled. When it comes to our teaching, are we teaching our pet subject because we want to hear it? Because we want to hear ourselves talk? Or are we teaching on something that's to feed the congregation? That's what matters. We're there to serve. What about our singing? Are we singing out with the spirit and the understanding? Not because we love the sound of our voice, but because we want to encourage and uplift someone else. We had dinner here, and we're sitting over there eating. All of a sudden, I hear a bunch of kids just singing church songs. And that was an encouragement to me. I heard them singing praises to God from in here as I'm trying to, enjoy a cookie. It was good. I mean, the cookie was good. The singing was also pretty good. But it was an encouragement. Are we serving, or are we expecting to be served? If we have a mindset that when we come to church, we're there to get something out of it, then we're going to leave hungry. And what's going to happen over time is we're going to look for somewhere else that'll feed us more. Because there's going to be plenty of different buffet lines at buildings all across the city. And they're all going to try to sway you to come and be a part of them based on the selfish need of man to be served. But that's not what a body does. A body serves each other. A body feeds each other. A body cares for each other, not to be cared for. Our work is a testimony. Jesus says in Matthew 5:16, let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. God created this relationship with man so that there would be this opportunity for us to share. And he told us in our work that we're to go and to do good things. Sometimes you say, well, Scripture also says, do your alms, you do it privately. When you pray, you go in the closet. And sometimes it's like, how do we reconcile that with go shine your light? How do you reconcile those things? Well, to me, it comes down to this. What's your motivation? He was telling them to pray in the closet because they were praying to be seen to men. He's not saying that you can never lead a public prayer at a prayer breakfast. He's saying that if your heart is in for the public praise, then you're doing it for the wrong reason. He's not saying that you can't go sing the national anthem at the school function because that's not what he's saying. He's saying to do these things with the right spirit. And if you are giving, if you're putting your money in the plate so everybody can see how much you give, then that's a heart problem. It doesn't mean that the deacon picking up the plate can't know what you put. That's not the point. The point is we're to be a testimony with our life. That means to do things that are visibly seen in the community, in the world. They've got to see what we're doing. We can't hide what we're doing, but we got to make sure our heart is such so that when they want to praise us, that praise doesn't become pride in our heart, doesn't become a weight on our shoulders, but rather we pass that on as praise to God. That's the kind of light we need to shine. The work can be a testimony, but we have to work. And that means at church, when there's things that need to be done, do them. Don't wait. Be engaged. Be active. Grab a broom. Push a chair. I guarantee you sometimes you're going to push the chair wrong. And you know what? And we got to, as leaders and people in authority, we got to have patience in those situations. We can't on one hand expect everyone to serve, but then micromanage everything. We got to have an openness where people can be engaged and serve, to get involved, to put their hands in and work, and not be afraid. Because we need to shine our light. But when you're doing that, don't do that so you can say, oh, did y'all see me sweeping in this corner? Look at me, I'm a good sweeper. That's not the point. The point isn't to be drawing attention to yourself. But I can tell you what, I see people, I've been here a couple of days, and I watch, and I look, and I see what happens. And I've noticed patterns, and I've noticed the way certain people instantly engage when there's an opportunity to serve. Our work is a testimony. If we work hard, it'll be evident. It's no strange thing that Nehemiah was given access to the king. You think if he was a lousy cupbearer, the king would have cared to give him the timber and give him the authority and ultimately the promotion to governor? Do you think he would have done that? No. Evidently, he was good at his job. Evidently, he served the king in such a way that when the king saw he was upset, it affected the king. You would imagine that the king could care less about the servant. Move along, next cupbearer, you're up. But he cared about Nehemiah. Evidently, Nehemiah was really good at his job. And because of that, he had a place at the right time to work what was needed for the people of God. You may not stand before kings. You may not stand in front of people of great authority, but you will stand in front of someone that you can make a difference. And if you work hard and you have those opportunities and you're presented with those, be bold. Be bold. And use that relationship for the glory of God and the benefit of His church. Proverbs 22 verse 29 says, "Do you see a man who excels in his work? He will stand before kings. He will not stand before unknown men." If you strive to be good at your job, you strive to be good at your service to the Lord, if you strive to be the father that you ought to be in your home, or the husband, or the mother, or the wife, or the grandmother, or the grandfather, if you strive to be good in those things, and you excel in those things, people will notice. Don't go seek it, but people will notice, and that influence is what we're talking about. That influence that can be used for the good for this church. Now, what can I do? We are all blessed with these three things. I've sat on nonprofit boards. I've been a part of a nonprofit for years. And when we talk about recruiting nonprofit people to serve on the boards, there's three things we always talk about: time, talent, and treasure. And we always say it's great if they have all three, but they need at least two of those to be a good board member. Either they got a lot of time and a lot of talent, or they got treasure. And if you're running a nonprofit, you want all the treasure you can get, right? When it comes to the church, it's really not that different. Some of you have more time than others. You've worked a job for 50 years. You've retired. You have more time. How are you using that time? Some of you have more treasure. You've been successful in your work, and you have more means to provide. How are you using that? What about talent? Maybe you don't have a lot of money. Maybe you don't have a lot of time. But you're able to use your specific talent in a very intentional way to help the church. You see, time is against us. John 9:4 says, "I must work the works of Him who sent me while it is day. The night is coming when no one can work." The reality is we are all limited with time. But some of us have more time than others. We have less responsibilities. Our children are grown, or we don't have children yet, or we're not married, or we have less things that we have to be concerned about. So if we have more time, let's make sure that that's our first bucket that we're contributing from. We're saying, hey, you need that building unlocked. You need that AC turned on. You need that file uploaded. You need that PowerPoint built. You need this. There's so many things we can mention. If you have time, say, here am I. I've got time. Use me. What about talent? 2 Corinthians 9:6, "But this I say, he who sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and he who sows bountifully will also reap bountifully." When we encourage buy-in from the members with your talent, that means sow what you can. Whatever that talent is, sow it. But if you are light in that sowing, if you are only giving a little bit of what you have, then you're going to reap a little bit. But if everyone uses the talent you have and you just share in abundance in that talent, the congregation is going to reap a great benefit. What about your treasure? "Give, and it will be given to you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over will be put into your bosom. For with the same measure that you use, it will be measured back to you." What about your treasure? Are you intentional with your giving to the work of the church? Do you take time and think about how you're budgeting your resources, your money, and how it can help spread the gospel here in Tulsa? Now, I've not seen your budget. It's not my business. But I would imagine that you have a budget. And I would imagine in that budget you've got line items for different things. I know in Harlingen we were very happy when we got to the point in our budget, our operations was pretty fixed. And at one point that was about 40 to 50% of our budget just to keep the doors open. But now, today, 55% of our budget is not operations or capital expenses or benevolence. 55% is evangelism. And that includes local and other places. When you think about your treasure, are you thinking about how that can be best used for God's work? Are you budgeting it in that way? Now, before we close this evening, when I was talking to Rusty about this and talking about how I want to cover some of these things, it's no secret. I've been doing evangelism for a long time. Been an evangelist for 20 plus years now. That is a hat I have worn. I've also been in the business world, and I've had businesses, and I understand business concepts. And sometimes those concepts, I think there's a lot of value in some of those things that can be applied to the church. And so what I'm about to talk about is not straight from a passage, but rather from a concept that I believe is biblical, and we're going to use some biblical examples to show that. But I want you to bear with me a little bit as we discuss a concept about how little things can make a big difference. There's a book. It's called The Tipping Point. Malcolm Gladwell wrote the book. It's a very interesting book. But part of his whole book is about studying epidemics. You say, okay. Well, this book came out before the pandemic, right? So which is very interesting because it feels almost like prophecy when you read this book. You're like, how did he know? But he studied epidemics and how things would become viral or how trends would just come out of nowhere. And all of a sudden, all the women are wearing Walmart dresses. Like, how are these things happening? But he would see these things and see how things would become viral or how things would move in such a way in a short amount of time. And he pinpointed that for those things that happened in every single case in his research, there were three things that were consistent. There were people who are connectors, people that he classified as salesmen, and people he classified as mavens. And let me describe what these three categories are. A connector is that person that knows everybody. You go to that person, you're like, man, I'm new to town. I've got this grinding noise in the back of my trunk, like when I'm closing the trunk. I got you. I know the guy that does the repairs who only works on trunks. That guy that knows everybody that has somebody they know. Or, hey, I need to take out a loan. Do you have a banker? Well, what's your business type? Oh, this type? Here, this is the bank you want to go to. This person you want to talk to. This is the front office lady. Make sure you talk to her. When you talk to her, tell her she looks pretty in that dress. Right? Like the people that just know the people. They know how to get through the door. They don't have anything to sell. They just have relationships. They just care about people. They're the person that have served multiple years as a Rotary president. Okay? These are the people that are in all the different social clubs. They're the people that are in the garden club. And also, but they know everybody. State senator wants to, you want to talk to state senator. You talk to this person and they can make the connection. That's a connector. Okay? Salesman. Salesman is the person that can convince you to buy the thing that you didn't know that you needed until they talk to you. And then all of a sudden you've got a 36-month SEO contract, right? So a salesman can convince you on things and can persuade you. And so a salesman is a persuasive person, someone that can own the conversation, can see what you're lacking, and can convince the person on how they can solve that problem. Now, sometimes salesmen are shady and all this, I get that. But salesmen, that concept is someone that isn't afraid to have a conversation about money, isn't afraid to have a conversation about fixing a problem that they have, and can be direct without fear and not causing people to be turned away. Third category is mavens, and this one's a little more interesting. Whereas a connector is the person that's just a socialite, just someone that just knows everybody. And a salesman who's out seeking those conversations, mavens in his category, are those technical experts. So, for instance, if you were to start A lot of times in the tech industry, they'll start a business. You'll have an entrepreneur who might be a natural salesman, but you will have a CTO, a chief technical officer, who is a subject expert. They know that subject inside and out. They actually have all the knowledge, but they don't know how to talk to people. So they have all the knowledge, they don't know how to raise money. But the salesman comes in, raises the money, and they start a company. And that's typically, you'll see a lot of these IT companies, most of these tech companies you know of, the names, you may know Elon Musk, you don't know the people that were the CTOs in those companies, but you know the salesmen, you know the people that are out front. The mavens are those people that have that institutional knowledge. They have the wisdom, they have the knowledge on a variety of subjects. So in his book, and what he says is for there to be an epidemic or something to become viral, you need these three, because you need someone that is literally doing all the Google reviews and is doing all the Reddit articles. And people go to and they say, man, this person knows everything. They know, they are wise. They understand. They know what it is. So I'm going to go get a review. Where do I go? I go to a maven. Salesman. They're out talking about it. They're going and saying, hey, you need this thing. You need this purse. You know, the guy wouldn't probably say that, but the lady might say, hey, you need this purse. You need this outfit. Oh, don't you like it? It's so pretty. Look at me. Connectors are introducing the salesman. Hey, come to my social organization. Oh, let's go stand around and eat fine cheeses. And you go talk to them. And what happens? All of a sudden, a trend takes off. Now, there is all sorts of internet algorithms that have come out since then, but are basically those same concepts. And that was what was so interesting about reading this book. And as I read that, and as Lacey and I discussed it, we listened to it, I think, on a trip one time, and we just kept going back and forth, like, how do we use this for the church? Well, we started thinking about it. We had mavens in our church. We had Brother Jerry Joyner. He knows a lot of Old Testament history. He knows a lot about a lot of things. He's someone that you can just go talk to about the Bible and has a lot of biblical knowledge. We had Brother Scott Pinkerton, one of our elders, who's a connector. Brother Scott knows every single person who has ever lived or died in Olton, Texas, where he's from. And half of them are on our prayer list right now in Harlingen because he knows everybody. If there's a flood, if there's a storm, if there's a something, he knows somebody. He's a connector. He has those relationships. We couldn't figure out who the salesman might be in our congregation, but there was probably one or two, right? No, but we identified, hey, there's some people in the congregation that don't mind going and talking to people. But they may not have all those relationships. So what do they need? They need, hey, Scott, can you set up this Bible study? I'll go do the Bible study, but I don't know them. You know them. That seems like a good connection. Hey, Jerry, I'm not really familiar on this subject. They're from this weird denomination that has a certain belief. Do you know anything about this? Oh, okay, cool. You see what I'm saying? All of a sudden, we're able to lean in our own skill sets. And what happens to the organism? What happens to the church? There's growth. Because people are finding a way to contribute. Now, what are some biblical examples of this? This is the part I thought was really cool. So when I was going through this and trying to, look at this, I started seeing it in different stories in Scripture. In John chapter 12, verses 20 through 22, we see this was, okay, let me just read it. John 12, verse 20. Now, among those who went up to worship at the feast were some Greeks. So these came to Philip, who was from Bethsaida in Galilee, and asked him, Sir, we wish to see Jesus. Philip went and told Andrew. Andrew and Philip went and told Jesus. Here is an example, I believe, of a connector. Philip was seen by the Greeks. You know who else was from Bethsaida? Peter, Andrew, James, John, Nathaniel. They were all from the same town. Why was it that Philip was the one they went to? We don't really know a whole lot. Philip says like 3 lines in the whole Bible. Maybe 2 or 3. Not very many. In the whole Bible. Yet something about him was familiar enough for these Greeks to go, hey, we know that guy. We're going to go talk to him. We're going to go talk to Philip. And what did Philip do? He instantly did what? He connected him to the people he connected him to Andrew, and together they went to see Jesus. He was a connector. He was seen and known and had a relationship evidently with these people. And when they were seeking, they went to him. What about salesman? A great salesman in the Bible isn't one of the guys, but actually the woman at the well. It says in John chapter 4, verse 7, a woman from Samaria came to draw water. Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink." After their whole exchange, and Jesus tells her all about herself in verse 28. So the woman left her water jar and went away into town and said to the people, "Come see a man who told me all that I ever did. Can this be the Christ?" And they went out of the town and were coming to him. What a salesman. She went into the town and convinced the whole town to come out and meet Jesus. What about mavens? In Acts chapter 15, verse 12 and 13, it says, "And all the assembly fell silent, and they listened to Barnabas and Paul as they relayed the signs and wonders God had done through them among the Gentiles. After they finished speaking, James replied, 'Brothers, listen to me.' Then it seemed good to the apostles," verse 22, "Then it seemed good to the apostles and elders with the whole church." And sorry about that. I left out the actual part where James was talking. But the point of this was the whole assembly was listening to what was happening here with Paul and Barnabas. But when James spoke, everyone listened. We don't know a whole lot about what James had to say, but evidently he was a pillar in the church. Evidently he had a lot of wisdom. And when he spoke, everyone listened. I say all that to say that little things can make a big difference. And you may not know your talent or role. But I believe that most of you, if not all of you, can fall in one of these three categories if you will put in the effort. You say, "Well, I'm not a salesman. I don't know how to talk to people. I don't know how to convince people, rather. I don't know how to convince people." But maybe you know some people. And maybe you're not the big socialite that knows everybody, but you know somebody. And maybe you're not the big connector that is going to cause the epidemic all by itself or that cause the church to grow all by your relationships. But I can guarantee you this. If you have one relationship that you connect a salesman to or a maven to and you bring them into the church, then that's another soul that's part of the team. Another worker in the kingdom. Maybe you aren't the biggest connector. Maybe you're not the best salesman. But maybe you have a way to convince a certain group of people. Convince those people. Maybe you don't have all the knowledge of Scripture, but you can sit down and you can study something if you want to put your mind to it. And maybe this congregation needs someone who really knows Paul's missionary journey so that when there's Bible Jeopardy, you'll get that answer right. Maybe you need to be the one that really has a deep knowledge of Nehemiah. Well, that wasn't me until I studied this. I'll tell you that. Now I'm kind of obsessed a little bit. But you can be the expert of something that can help the church. Maybe it's social media. Maybe it's websites. Maybe it can be how to design a PowerPoint presentation. Maybe it can be a number of things. But you have something you can be an expert in that can be useful for the church.